The dense forest was cloaked in silence, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a lone owl. Beneath the thick canopy, Captain Yarrick Holt moved with practiced stealth, his steps soundless on the moss-covered ground. The early morning air was crisp, laced with the earthy scent of pine and damp soil. To Yarrick, these woods were more than just a home, they were his sanctuary, a place where he could leave behind the chaos of his past. But today, something was wrong. Yarrick paused mid-stride, his senses on high alert. The usual chorus of the forest had gone eerily quiet, as if the very earth was holding its breath. His instincts, honed by years of combat, screamed that something was out of place. He scanned his surroundings, every nerve tingling with unease. The birds were absent, and even the wind seemed hesitant to stir the branches. Then he saw it, a faint shimmer in the air, barely perceptible against the early morning mist. It was an anomaly, a distortion in the fabric of reality itself. Yarrick's eyes narrowed as he approached, careful to stay hidden. The shimmer solidified, revealing the outline of something massive, hovering silently above the treetops. An alien ship, its surface rippling with energy, materialized as if conjured by the forest's silence. Yarrick's heart pounded, but his training took over. He crouched lower, moving swiftly through the underbrush. He had seen advanced military technology before, but this was beyond anything humanity had ever conceived. The ship was sleek, almost organic in its design, with dark, shifting panels that absorbed the light around it. As he watched, a hatch opened silently on the underside of the vessel. From it descended a group of figures, tall and imposing, clad in armor that gleamed with an unsettling iridescence. They moved with a predatory grace, their elongated limbs and sharp, angular features marking them as something otherworldly. The lead figure, taller than the rest, exuded an air of command and cold precision. Zyrex, the leader of the alien hunting party, surveyed the forest with a hunter's gaze. This planet was new to him, but the thrill of the hunt was a universal language. His species had traversed galaxies, seeking worthy prey to challenge their skills, and Earth was their latest arena. The humans were considered primitive, but Zyrex knew better than to underestimate any prey. The hunt was sacred, and every kill a test of honor. Yarrick watched as the aliens fanned out, moving silently into the forest, their intent clear. They were here to hunt, and by the look in their eyes, it wasn't animals they were after. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. These creatures had come for sport, and humans were the target. Yarrick's mind raced, but fear was quickly replaced by resolve. He had faced death many times before, and he wasn't about to let these invaders turn his home into a killing ground. He slipped away from his vantage point, his movements fluid and silent. He needed to warn the nearby town, to prepare for what was coming. But more than that, he needed to survive, and to fight back. The hunt had begun, but Yarrick Holt was no ordinary prey. He was a soldier, a survivor, and he would make sure these alien hunters learned the true meaning of fear. As the first rays of dawn pierced the treetops, Yarrick melted into the shadows, his mind already crafting a plan. The forest was his domain, and he would use every ounce of his skill to turn the tables on these hunters. They had come to Earth for sport, but they would soon discover that this was a game they could not win. And as the sun rose, casting long shadows across the forest floor, a new predator was born, a man determined to defend his world, no matter the cost. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Yarrick Holt found the first sign of the invaders' presence. The carcass of a deer, its throat slashed with surgical precision, lay sprawled across the forest floor. The ground around it was undisturbed, as if the animal had simply collapsed where it stood. Yarrick knelt beside the body, his hand brushing over the unnatural wounds. There was no blood. Whatever had killed this creature had done so with such efficiency that the heart had stopped before it could bleed out. Yarrick's jaw tightened. This was no ordinary predator. The alien hunters were skilled, far more than he had anticipated. They moved with a lethal grace, leaving minimal trace of their passage. But Yarrick knew the forest better than anyone. He would find their trail, and he would make them pay for every life they took. He rose, scanning the area with a practiced eye. His years of military training kicked in, and he began to piece together the hunter's movements. A broken twig here, an overturned stone there, subtle signs that would have gone unnoticed by anyone else. They were heading toward the town. His heart pounded with urgency. Yarrick set off at a brisk pace, every sense attuned to his surroundings. The air was thick with tension, the forest holding its breath in the face of this new threat. The usual sounds of life were absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness that gnawed at the edge of his nerves. He was racing against time, but he could not afford to be careless. One mistake, and he would become their prey. As he approached the outskirts of the town, Yarrick slowed, crouching low as he observed from the cover of the trees. The small settlement was just beginning to stir. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and a few early risers moved about, oblivious to the danger that lurked nearby. Yarrick's eyes darted to the shadows, searching for any sign of the hunters. Then he saw them, two of the alien hunters, almost invisible against the backdrop of the forest. They moved with an eerie silence, their forms blending seamlessly with the environment. Yarrick's breath caught in his throat. They were scouting, choosing their targets with a predator's patience. He needed to warn the town, but how? A sudden movement would draw their attention, and he was outnumbered. Yarrick's mind raced, calculating his options. The hunters were methodical, but they had one glaring weakness: they didn't know him, or the lengths he would go to protect his home. Yarrick slipped back into the woods, moving parallel to the alien's path. He needed to create a diversion, something to draw them away from the town. His gaze fell on a cluster of rocks near a ridge, and an idea formed. Moving quickly, he gathered the materials he needed, setting a trap that would trigger a small landslide. It wasn't much, but it would buy him time. He positioned himself at a distance, watching as the hunters neared the trap. With a quick, precise motion, Yarrick triggered the landslide. Rocks tumbled down the slope, crashing through the underbrush. The hunters reacted instantly, their attention diverted to the commotion. They moved toward the noise, weapons drawn. Yarrick didn't wait to see the outcome. He sprinted toward the town, his heart pounding in his chest. He burst into the main square, startling the few people who had gathered there. "Get inside!" he shouted, his voice commanding. "Now! We're under attack!" Confusion rippled through the small crowd, but the urgency in Yarrick's tones spurred them into action. As they scattered, Yarrick positioned himself at the edge of the square, scanning the treeline for any sign of the hunters. The town was small, defenseless, and unaware of the terror lurking just beyond the trees. The hunt had begun in earnest, but Yarrick Holt was no ordinary prey. And this town, his town, would not fall without a fight. As the first signs of the hunters appeared at the edge of the forest, Yarrick tightened his grip on his weapon, his resolve hardening. This was his home, and he would defend it to the last breath. Yarrick's breath came in controlled, steady bursts as he watched the alien hunters advance from the cover of the forest. They moved with the confidence of apex predators, their tall forms slicing through the shadows with an effortless precision. The hunters' iridescent armor shimmered in the dim morning light, reflecting the cold, calculating intent in their eyes. To them, this was just another hunt, another world to conquer. But Yarrick knew better. These aliens, for all their advanced technology and superior physical prowess, had underestimated one critical element: human resolve. He crouched behind a low stone wall, his fingers tightening around the grip of his rifle. The weapon was old, a relic from his military days, but it was reliable, like him. His mind raced, plotting the next move. He had spent the night rigging the town's perimeter with makeshift traps, using the landscape to his advantage. The hunters would soon find that they were not the only predators in this game. As the first hunter reached the edge of the town, Yarrick caught a glimpse of the creature's elongated, angular face beneath its helmet. Cold, calculating, and devoid of empathy. These beings had come to Earth expecting easy prey, a simple sport. They didn't know what it meant to fight for survival, for home. The hunter stepped into the open, its gaze scanning the deserted streets. Yarrick's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for the right moment. He needed to strike hard and fast, disrupting their formation before they could regroup. The tension built with each passing second, the air thick with anticipation. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the stillness as one of Jarek's traps triggered. A heavy net, woven from reinforced steel cables, snapped up from the ground, ensnaring the hunter in a brutal embrace. The alien thrashed violently, but the trap held firm, the cables biting into its armor. Yarek didn't hesitate. He sprang from his position, leveling his rifle at the entangled alien. A sharp, controlled burst of gunfire rang out, the bullets striking true. The hunter's body jerked as the rounds tore through its armor, and it crumpled to the ground, motionless. The victory was fleeting. The other hunters reacted instantly, their heads snapping toward the source of the gunfire. Yarek ducked behind the wall just as a plasma bolt seared through the air where he had stood moments before. The smell of burnt ozone filled his nostrils as the bolt slammed into the wall, sending shards of stone flying. Yarek rolled to his feet, his mind racing. He needed to keep moving, keep them off balance. The town was a labyrinth of narrow alleys and hidden passages, and he knew every inch of it. He sprinted down a side street, his boots pounding the cobblestones, drawing the hunters deeper into the maze. A second hunter followed, moving with a terrifying speed and agility that belied its size. Yarek rounded a corner and skidded to a stop in a small courtyard. The hunter was right behind him, its plasma rifle trained on Jarek's back. But Yarek had planned for this. As the hunter entered the courtyard, it triggered another trap, a hidden tripwire connected to a series of explosive charges buried beneath the ground. The courtyard erupted in a deafening blast, the force of the explosion lifting the hunter off its feet and slamming it into a nearby wall. Smoke and debris filled the air, the acrid scent stinging Jarek's eyes. He didn't wait to see if the alien survived the blast. He couldn't afford to. The remaining hunters would be closing in, their wrath provoked by the deaths of their comrades. Yarek pushed forward, weaving through the town's winding streets, setting more traps as he went. His muscles burned with exertion, but he pressed on, driven by the knowledge that every second counted. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a war, and Yarek intended to win it. As he rounded another corner, a dark shape loomed ahead. Zyrex, the leader of the hunters, stood waiting, his weapon raised. Yarek skidded to a halt, his heart hammering in his chest. The two locked eyes, predator and prey, each assessing the other in a split second of mutual recognition. Yarek tightened his grip on his rifle, ready for the final confrontation. The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome was uncertain. But one thing was clear: this was the moment that would decide everything. The hunt was far from over, and as the tension reached its peak, Yarek knew that only one would emerge victorious. Jarek's heart pounded as he faced Zyrex, the leader of the alien hunters. The creature loomed tall and menacing, its eyes glinting with a predatory intelligence that chilled Yarek to the bone. Every muscle in his body tensed as he prepared for the inevitable confrontation. This was the moment everything had been building toward, the final stand. The two adversaries stood in the narrow alleyway, surrounded by the crumbling remnants of the town Yarek had sworn to protect. Smoke from the earlier explosions still hung heavy in the air, mingling with the acrid scent of scorched earth. The world seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the hunter and his prey. Zyrex moved first, his weapon humming with lethal energy as he aimed at Jarek's chest. Without hesitation, Yarek dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the plasma bolt that scorched the ground where he had stood. He rolled to his feet, firing a quick burst from his rifle, but Zyrex was already in motion, darting to the side with unnatural speed. Yarek knew he couldn't match the alien's strength or speed, but he didn't need to. He had something Zyrex lacked, a deep understanding of this terrain, and a will to defend it at all costs. Jarek's mind raced, searching for a way to turn the fight in his favor. The alley was too narrow for him to rely on traps, and the close quarters meant he couldn't keep his distance for long. He had to lure Zyrex into a position where he could use the environment to his advantage. As he fired another round, Yarek began to retreat, leading Zyrex deeper into the town's labyrinthine streets. Zyrex followed, his movements precise and relentless. Every step was calculated, every shot aimed to kill. Jarek's breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the winding alleys, his mind working frantically. He had set traps throughout the town, but they were scattered, designed to take out multiple hunters, not just one. He needed to guide Zyrex to a specific spot, an old grain storage building on the edge of town. Yarrick darted around a corner, his heart hammering in his chest. He could hear Zyrex's footsteps behind him, the alien closing in with terrifying speed. The storage building was just ahead, its entrance obscured by debris. Jarek's plan hinged on precise timing. One misstep, and he'd be dead. He burst into the building, quickly scanning the interior. The trap was ready, a series of explosives rigged to the structure's supports. If he could get Zyrex inside, he could bring the whole building down on top of him. But Yarrick would have only seconds to escape before the explosion triggered. Zyrex entered the building, his weapon raised and eyes locked on Yarrick. The two stared each other down, the air thick with anticipation. Jarek's grip on his rifle tightened as he took a step back, luring Zyrex further into the trap. Zyrex followed, his gaze unwavering. Then, with a sudden, desperate motion, Yarrick hurled his rifle at Zyrex, the weapon clattering against the ground as a distraction. The alien's gaze flicked downward for just an instant, enough time for Yarrick to dive toward the exit. As he rolled out of the building, he triggered the detonator. The explosion rocked the town, a deafening roar that sent debris flying in all directions. The old building collapsed in on itself, a cloud of dust and smoke billowing into the air. Yarrick hit the ground hard, shielding his head from the falling rubble. For a moment, everything was chaos, the world reduced to noise and dust. When the dust finally began to settle, Yarrick pushed himself to his feet, coughing as he wiped dirt from his eyes. The building was nothing more than a smoldering heap of ruins, and there was no sign of Zyrex. Jarek's chest tightened as he scanned the wreckage, half expecting the alien to emerge unscathed. But the silence held. Jarek's shoulders sagged with exhaustion as the reality of his victory sank in. Zyrex was gone. The leader of the hunters had been defeated, and the town, his town, was safe. The fight was over, but the cost had been high. Yarrick looked around at the wreckage, the weight of his actions settling heavily on his shoulders. He had saved the town, but it would never be the same. As the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, Yarrick turned and began the long walk back through the ruined streets. The hunt was over, and humanity had prevailed. But the scars of this battle would remain, a reminder of the day when the hunters became the hunted.